Hey everyone, it's Joe Glines here in Dallas, Texas.
Yeah, and Jackie here from Copenhagen, Denmark.
I think we have the same 4 listeners, so maybe we can stop introducing ourselves.
We could try, but then they would probably think, who are they? But yeah.
Yeah, that's funny. So on today's short talk, I've been reading a lot of stuff on RPA and robotics process automation, which is really kind of technically what AutoHotkey is, and the term digital worker comes up a lot, and I'm curious. It got me thinking. Back, I'd say it was probably like 15, 20 years ago. When I was starting out in the corporate world, like macros, especially in Excel and other things, were pretty commonplace, right? I'd see a lot of people using them and writing them, and it was pretty well known that you could do stuff. And then I'd say about 5 years after that, it became pretty rare where I would see anyone using a macro, and people just started really doing things. They stopped automating things, and that, if you want to call that automation, which I do. And it seems like lately, because of RPA, it's, I think, starting to get some traction. But this whole digital worker term, I was curious, and I want to think of it from 3 different perspectives. There's people who work in automation, like RPA experts. Then there's the corporate management view, and then a corporate employee view, right? And so for me, and I know Jackie's kind of the same way, we're more the RPA expert side. And when I hear digital worker, I'm like, well, what is that? Because I'll hear like, are we going to hire a digital worker? And to me, I'm not going to say crazy, but it doesn't make sense, right? It's not a person. I wouldn't pay additional taxes on it. It's actually kind of funny because it's definitely not a person, because people take breaks and vacation and have a lot of baggage, and these don't have that.
Yeah, and with the company that I work for, we have recently, or I've been recently introduced to what they're doing, and the company they have partnered up with that are using one of the big industry movers on this, and they're trying to make what would you say, the employees actually find the tasks that a digital worker, if that's what we're going to call them, could solve. So I asked one of the experts from the company who actually was doing these process setups so that a digital worker could do the task. I was like, but do we then like pay per task that we wanted to do? Mm-hmm. No, that was not the thing. We already had a few different tasks that it's currently doing for us, and those are only taking up like maybe 8% of the worker's time, so to speak. It might be doing something at 2 a.m. at night, and then it'll use an hour or 2 on doing that. And all the rest of the day, it's still available. And only if its full 24 hours, so to speak, time frame is filled, would we need to pay for another one, like a thread or a process, or whatever you'd call those. And it made fine sense to view it in that aspect, that it was just like a 24-hour workhorse or whatever, where with a lot of the stuff that you talked about with macros and stuff like that, it would be something that a human would initialize.
Yeah. Assisted RPA.
Yeah, exactly. Like a human that would sit there and actually become more productive. They had a specific example in our corroboration on the one that was perhaps the most successful of the ones they'd made yet, which was one that had to do with accounting, where it was freeing up a good amount of employees from the accounting part of a company, because they would need to pass this task between each other, back and forth, to get answers, and people would know different parts of it. And maybe there was even some that didn't have the knowledge to pull out the numbers from whichever accounting system was needed and stuff like that. So the task that the digital worker ended up actually doing was one that was first clearly mapped out by humans, and someone was analyzing and documenting the process. And then in the end, a digital piece of software actually did all the steps. And it was able to do it at night, where they would have had to do it during their workday. And it didn't actually end up doing it faster than they would have done it. It just did it when they wouldn't have been at work.
Yeah, well, and around the clock, right? Or at least it didn't take coffee breaks and vacations and whatnot.
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
Exactly, and nobody had to wait for one thing to be done and passed off to the next, and there was no like unused timeframes in between while it was, let's say, it was in the inbox of someone, just waiting for approval or waiting for them to grab it and do it. It would be able to do the entire task from one end to another without waiting on anybody. But they were there, the people who had been the ones that did the task. They were the ones that the company had taken into this, what do we call a thing like that? They were on stage telling everybody how nice it was not to have to wait, or not to have to do this thing, because apparently they felt it was a tedious task, one with a lot of legwork, but not very productive. But it was needed to actually, I think it was, they were proving that the taxes we had paid were correct, so that we had documentation that the taxes we had paid were correct, so that we had our own documentation to prove that it was okay. But yeah, it was interesting. But it was funny that these people who had actually lost, so to speak, lost a thing that they were doing within their day had been passed off to a digital piece of software. And they were there kind of, maybe not boasting, but they were at least telling everybody how clever and smart and nice it was.
Yeah, sure. And actually, and I want to hit a point real quickly here, because the other one, when I've heard some of this, when they talk about hiring a digital worker, the implication is that, like, it's almost like a plugin I can go get and it's going to work right away and do everything. And it's like, we know from when you write this, like, it's look, if that was possible, Microsoft would have created this shit a long time ago, right?
Yeah.
And they'd be selling it. And that's why they've built Excel flexible enough, but to people can adapt it. But a lot of the things that are similar enough that are in it already. So it's going to need some, let's call it training, just like a person would, right? Need to set it up and configure it and stuff. So it's not going to be right out of the box and going to work right away, be able to do the stuff. It takes a lot more things to go with it. But yeah, so then the next view is the corporate management type of view. And this is where I think it is possible via like positioning for a given company stressing a digital worker, there might get some excitement around the term, right? Because most of corporate America and management, you want to save money and you understand that it's usually a numbers game. And also it's more reliable and faster, which is some of the stuff. Well, you didn't say faster, but the reliability and consistency, and they'll probably get more done just because you can also scale it, right? It's another great one.
Yeah, I'd say the person that we had and that thing was representing the company that did the automation. He, of course, immediately was ready when people talked about speed.
Mm-hmm.
You can turn up the speed.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason that it isn't faster is because it needs to wait for the other programs that it's interacting with. And so it is, as we know, as people with AutoHotkey, a lot of times AutoHotkey is not the slow part. It's
Right.
more the program that needs to do the calculations or that needs to respond or that needs to be ready. That's more of a bottleneck than the actual programming language or the speed of whatever automation you've made.
But I think you made an excellent point earlier, though, which is one of the things. Even when I write a script and I compare the speed of me doing it versus the script doing it, I can have the script monitor when something is ready and accessible to do something. And I was really surprised to see how much faster the script was than me just because of that. Because as a human, you either get distracted or even when you're looking at it, it takes you time to react and to move forward, right? So I was amazed at some of the stuff I did that really sped up because of that little ability to have a computer pinging it over and over until it's ready to go and then go.
Yeah, I'd say one of the places I saw it first was, of course, with web scraping and seeing how instantly you could make a script or a program react to whatever the DOM or the
Mm-hmm.
server or whatever thing you were waiting for would tell you that it was ready,
Yeah.
instead of me sitting there waiting for, let's say, text fields to load and a button to turn blue.
Right.
The script might still be waiting for the button to start turning blue, but because it's just an event and it gets the information instantly, it can act within
Oh,
maybe 50
you almost
milliseconds or something
you almost
weird,
don't even
right?
see it, right?
No.
It's when I was doing, I'm like, wow, it's amazing.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to run here in a minute, so let's get to the last group, the corporate employee. Now, this is where I think it's really interesting because here you have corporate management that might draw more interest from them, and of course, that's who, generally speaking, people are going to sell to around this stuff. However, at some point, and I don't think we're there yet, like you mentioned in your story, but corporate employees might feel more threatened that I'm getting replaced by robots. And when you say a digital worker, it might even amplify that like feeling.
Yeah, I think it's not much weirder than moving workload overseas. I
Yeah,
think it's about the same impact.
great
Um,
point.
what they've done at my company currently is, oh, it's only this small piece over here where you would normally have used a half an hour or an hour or two during the week, and then we will hand that over. They're not they're not pushing it as something that's taking over for a full 8 hours. But the thing is that is what it's gonna be doing, but it's not gonna be doing it for a specific person or a specific worker at one time. It
Right,
will
right, right.
not replace one-to-one people. It will slowly incorporate more and more, and then when that digital worker is filled for 24 hours or whatever, then you'll add another, and he will start, or that it will start taking on more small tasks and fill that up slowly. And at some point, within some time or something, these will have taken what would have been a full worker's job.
Mm-hmm.
But you won't see it as like a one-to-one replacement.
Yeah,
Like, oh, now the digital worker is doing everything you did, Joe. Now you can don't come in tomorrow, right?
yeah,
But they might not need people for the next big thing.
right.
If there is a big deadline, they'll
Yeah.
be ahead of time, or they don't need to man up to Christmas, or they
Right.
won't
Or
need
as
to.
people quit, they don't replace them with other employees; they replace them with automation.
Yeah, exactly. Because now he quit. He got another job. That's fine. But you know what, Judy, please, can you make sure that his emails are redirected, because the other things he did, he has a little bit of space on his, and the rest of it is taken care of by a digital worker, right? So yeah, I'm pretty sure that will be how people will end up seeing it.
Here's one that I hadn't thought of, and was it's one of the things that annoys me about some of the larger companies that are doing stuff. And I'm very curious if they're using the term digital worker to help enforce it, I think is the right way I want to say this. When we use AutoHotkey, right? One is it's open source and free, and we can write as many as we want, and we can have multiple scripts running, and there's no cost. Even if there was a cost, it's we can write as many scripts as we want. Doesn't matter. In some of these other tools, you are literally buying one license to do one thing at a time, which really is kind of like an employee kind of thing, right? And they can be doing one, they can switch them to another. I get that, but the licenses are sizable, right, in their cost. And I wonder if that's part of the reason for using this worker thing, is helps you kind of feel like that's what we're getting is this one thing, and they don't realize it's a piece of software, right? I mean, why in the world would I be limited? To me, knowing what AutoHotkey can do, it's frustrating to hear how much money is spent on some of these things.
Yeah, and I think I'm getting what you're saying, and I think it's being pushed. Digital worker, it's a weird one to go for, but it's maybe to make it an easier sell. If you call it a digital worker, people might have a better idea of what they can make it do, what
agree.
role it is filling. It fills the same role as if you hired a human to do a task. Now we'll just teach a piece of software to do that task.
You know what, Jackie? I'm sorry, I'm going to cut in here because I think you just nailed it. So much so because you and I both really, really dislike the whole robotics process automation term, right? Because everyone thinks of robots, and by shifting it to digital worker, maybe that helps us get around the whole robot confusion about robot, right? So I will say I like it for that reason. I think it's a beautiful point. Yeah. All right, I have to run. What I would love, though, is if anyone watching this, especially coming from where you are in your position in life, right? If you're doing the automation side, kind of chime in with some comments about it. If you're working at the corporate America, or if you're the management, type in your opinions, and if you have some of what you think the other positions people talked about would have. I'd love to hear that. It'd be awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks, man. All right, I got to run.
Yeah, absolutely, Joe. Bye.
Okay.